Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. I'd love it if you could leave a comment letting me know where you're listening from around the world. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe if you're enjoying this video. Story 1. I grew up in northern Arizona, near the edge of the Navajo Nation. My grandfather was a quiet man, but when he spoke, his words carried weight. Never whistle at night, he told me once, his dark eyes fixed on mine. Never call a name after sunset, and never, ever walk alone in the desert after dark. I was 16 when I finally understood why. It was late September, the kind of night where the desert wind carried whispers you could almost convince yourself weren't real. My friends and I, Jonah, Mark, and Ricky, had set up camp near the old canyon trails. We had a fire going, a cooler full of beers stolen from Mark's dad, and enough stupid ghost stories to keep us entertained. We were just kids, cocky and fearless. The desert was silent around us, save for the occasional rustling of the wind through the sagebrush. It should have been peaceful, but even then, I remember feeling it. Something was off. The quiet was too deep, too absolute. The way the firelight flickered against the canyon walls made it seem like the shadows were stretching, moving. We ignored it. At midnight, we put out the fire and crawled into our sleeping bags. I dozed off almost instantly, the warmth of the beer humming in my veins. But something woke me an hour later, something that made my stomach twist and my skin crawl. A voice. Daniel. It wasn't just my name. It was my name and Jonah's voice. I sat up, blinking in the darkness. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a dull, reddish glow around the campsite. Jonah's tent was zipped shut, his steady breathing coming from inside. Daniel, come here. The voice was closer now. Too close. It was wrong. Stretched, warped, like a cassette tape playing at the wrong speed. The hairs on my arms stood up. I turned slowly toward the trees. Something was standing just beyond the edge of the light. My fingers tightened around my flashlight. I clicked it on, the beam cutting through the dark. At first, my brain refused to make sense of what I was seeing. It looked like a man. Almost. It was too tall, its limbs too long, its body wrapped in what looked like an old, tattered deer hide. But the face, God, the face, was the worst part. It had the shape of a man's, but the skin was stretched tight, the mouth too wide, the eyes black pits that seemed to pull the light in. And when it grinned, I saw yellowed, rotting teeth. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. The thing took a step forward, and I heard it then, the sound of hooves scraping against the dirt. A rancid stench rolled over me, thick and cloying, like rotting meat left out in the sun. My grandfather's words came back to me, crashing through my mind like a bullet. Don't look at it. Don't speak to it. Pray. I dropped to my knees. My hands trembled as I shut my eyes and started whispering the words he'd taught me, an old Navajo prayer I barely remembered. The air around me grew heavy, pressing down like invisible hands. The thing's breathing changed. It went from a slow, deliberate inhale to something frustrated, angry. It wanted me to look. Daniel, it rasped. The voice was shifting now, distorting, changing. Jonah, it said. Then Mom. Then Grandpa. It knew. My stomach lurched, but I kept my head bowed, my eyes squeezed shut. My voice shook as I whispered the last of the prayer. The silence stretched so long I thought maybe, just maybe, it was gone. Then I heard it move. A single step, then another, circling me. The sound of hooves crunching over dry leaves. The rustle of that filthy, tattered skin brushing against branches. I thought I was going to pass out. Then nothing. The air shifted. The pressure lifted. The smell vanished. I waited another full minute before I opened my eyes. The thing was gone. The desert was silent again. I crawled back to my tent, my limbs shaking so hard I could barely pull the zipper up. I didn't sleep. I just lay there, listening, waiting. When the sun finally broke over the horizon, I stepped outside. The others were already awake, their faces pale. "Did you hear it?" Jonah whispered. I nodded. None of us said anything else. We packed up in silence, shoving our gear into our bags, dismantling the fire pit with shaking hands. But when I turned to grab my flashlight, something caught my eye. The ground around our tents was covered in tracks. Not footprints, hoof prints, but they weren't from any deer. They were deep, deliberate, and they circled us, over and over and over. We left without another word. I haven't been back to those canyons since, and I never, ever will. Story 2. I used to be a wildlife officer in northern Minnesota, stationed deep in the North Woods where the winters were long and cruel. The kind of cold that gnawed at your bones, made your breath come out in thick clouds, and turned the trees into silent sentinels under a blanket of snow. People went missing sometimes. Hunters, hikers, the occasional tourist who thought they could handle the wilderness. Most of the time, we found them, sometimes alive, sometimes frozen stiff, their faces locked in an expression of quiet horror. But then there were the cases that didn't make sense, like the one near Blackwood Lake. It was late January when we got the call. A hunter named Mark Whitaker hadn't returned from his trip. His wife said he was experienced, knew the land better than most, but he'd been gone for 2 days without a word. The locals weren't surprised. Blackwood Lake had a reputation. Nobody talked about it outright, but if you brought it up in a bar, the conversation would turn uneasy. People would glance at the door like something might be listening. Still, duty was duty. 3 of us, me, my partner Doug, and a rookie named Travis, set out on snowmobiles that morning, following the route Whitaker had planned. The sun was a pale smudge in the sky, barely warming the earth. The only sounds were the engines and the crunch of ice beneath the treads. We found his camp a few miles from the lake. It was a mess. His tent had been ripped open from the outside, not torn like a bear had gotten curious. No, this was shredded like something with claws had been looking for him. His rifle, a heavy bolt-action Remington, lay in the snow, snapped in half. You don't just break a gun like that. Not without tools. Not without strength. Blood spattered the snow. A lot of it. But there were no human footprints leading away from the camp. Just claw marks. Massive. Twice the size of my hand. They led off into the trees, disappearing into the deep woods. Doug muttered a curse under his breath. Cougar. I shook my head. No cat does this. Travis, the rookie, looked pale. A bear, maybe. No bear walks on 2 legs, I said. Nobody argued. Still, we had a job to do. We followed the tracks into the woods, our rifles at the ready, the snow crunching softly under our boots. The further we went, the quieter the forest became. No wind, no rustling branches, no birds. That was wrong. The woods were never silent, even in winter. You'd always hear something: crows, the creak of trees, the distant groan of ice shifting on the lake. But here, nothing. It was like the whole damn forest was holding its breath. Then we heard it, a scream, not a normal scream, not a man, not an animal, but both. It was layered like two voices overlapping, one human, one wrong, deep and gurgling, high and shrill at the same time. It made my blood turn to ice. Travis froze. Jesus Christ. What the hell was that? Doug swallowed hard. We need to go. Now. I wanted to agree. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to turn around, get back to the snowmobiles, and forget we ever came here. But then I saw it, standing just beyond the trees. A towering figure, half hidden in the shadows. It was tall, at least 10 feet, maybe more, its body horribly thin, its skin stretched tight over jutting bones. Long, spindly fingers hung at its sides, tipped with curved black claws. Its face, God, it looked human almost, but the eyes were empty, soulless pits. The mouth was too wide, filled with rows of jagged, yellowed teeth, and was staring right at me. It grinned. The scream came again, and this time I realized it was coming from the thing's mouth. Dub moved first. He raised his rifle, but before he could even aim, I grabbed his arm. "Don't," I whispered. I don't know how I knew, but I did. If we shot, we'd die. Slowly I stepped back. Doug followed. So did Travis. We didn't turn our backs. We didn't run. The thing didn't move. It just watched us retreat, watched us stumble our way back through the trees. And when we finally reached the snowmobiles, I swear to God, I heard it laugh. We never found Whitaker. Officially, we wrote it up as a missing persons case, presumed dead due to exposure. But we knew. The locals knew too. Nobody questioned it. Nobody asked why we didn't go back. I still have nightmares about that thing. Sometimes I wake up in a cold sweat, convinced I can hear that awful, layered scream outside my window. And sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can hear it laughing. Story 3. I was 16 when my brother, Ryan, walked into the woods and never came back. I remember the night it happened because it was cold as hell, even for late October. The sky was the color of bruises, deep purple and black, and the wind cut through the trees like a blade. We were at our family's cabin near the Utah wilderness, a place my parents swore was peaceful, but I never believed that. It was too quiet, too still, the kind of place where the trees felt like they were watching you. Ryan and I had been outside by the fire, roasting marshmallows. He was 19, taller, stronger, the kind of guy who always seemed sure of himself. But that night, something had him on edge. He kept glancing toward the trees, his jaw tight. "You hear that?" he asked suddenly. I listened. Just the wind moving through the pines, the occasional rustle of dry leaves. "Hear what?" He shook his head. "I don't know. Thought I heard someone whispering." I laughed. "It's probably just the wind." But he didn't laugh with me. He just kept staring into the darkness. Then, without another word, he stood up and walked toward the trees. "Ryan." He didn't answer. He didn't look back. He just kept walking, his pace steady, like he was following something. I watched as he disappeared into the blackness. At first, I thought he was screwing around. He'd pop out from behind a tree and yell, "Boo," like he used to when we were kids. But 5 minutes passed. then 10, then 15. I ran inside to wake my parents. The search lasted weeks. Police, search parties, bloodhounds, all of them combing the woods, looking for any sign of him. They found nothing. No footprints, no scent, no shredded clothing, just nothing. It was like the trees had swallowed him whole. After a while, people stopped looking. My parents grieved, but deep down, I think they accepted that he was gone. People don't just vanish into thin air. At least, that's what they told themselves. But I knew better, because 6 months later, Ryan came back. I was home alone when I heard the knock. A slow, deliberate knock. 3 beats. A pause. 2 more. I almost didn't open the door. Something about it made my stomach feel hollow, like my body knew before my brain did that something was wrong. But my hands moved on their own, undoing the lock, pulling it open. And there he was, Ryan, wearing the same hoodie he had on the night he disappeared. His hair was a little longer, but otherwise, he looked exactly the same. Exactly. Too much the same. His skin was wrong. Too pale, too smooth like plastic. His eyes were too wide, the whites showing all the way around, like someone had stretched them open. And his smile. God, that smile. Too big, too sharp. The kind of smile that looked rehearsed. Ryan, I whispered. He didn't blink, didn't move, just stood there grinning. Aren't you gonna let me in? His voice was off, flat, like he was forcing himself to sound normal. I didn't even think. I slammed the door and threw the deadbolt. Then silence. For a second, I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just exhaustion, stress, some sick nightmare my brain had cooked up. Then, knock, knock, knock. 3 beats. Pause. 2 more. Then, scraping. A long, slow sound, like nails dragging across wood. Then he laughed. It wasn't Ryan's laugh. It was something else entirely, wet, guttural wrong. Like something imitating a laugh without understanding how it worked. I backed away from the door, my breath coming in sharp gasps. The scraping stopped. Then from inside the house, a whisper. Let me in. I ran to my room and locked the door. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might break my ribs. I sat there in the dark, knees pulled to my chest, listening. For hours, I heard footsteps moving up and down the hallway. Slow, careful, waiting. Then, just before dawn, the footsteps stopped, and whatever was out there laughed again. By the time the sun rose, it was gone. I told my parents, but they didn't believe me. They said it was grief, that I was imagining things. They told me Ryan was dead, that it was time to move on. But the next night, I saw him again, standing at the edge of the woods, watching the house. I don't know what happened to my brother, but I know that thing wasn't him, and it's still out there,